Spirit of Life is proudly sponsored by Mattress Oz, mattressesaras.com.au.
Hello, welcome to the Spirit of Life program. My name is Lucy Pace, and today my guest is Luke Mills, who has recently pioneered an Aussie Camino route for pilgrims. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks for having me, Lucy.
Luke, perhaps we can start about you telling us a little about yourself.
Well, I'm a school teacher here in Victoria. I teach at a Catholic school, St Francis Xavier College, which is in Beaconsfield. I am a father of 3 children, and I'm widowed. My wife passed away 5 years ago, so I'm presently just living with my children, raising them, and they're all in their their mid-teens at the moment. So that's been quite a handful for me, but we're going ahead, and that's all good. I have been working on this Camino for the past probably 18 months, getting on towards 2 years, and trying to develop further with which really started from having just an idea with some friends from school.
Yeah. Before we go any further, just for the viewers that don't know about Camino, what the Camino walk is, could you just tell us a little bit about that and how it originated, or where it's, yeah.
Yes, well, a Camino is the Spanish word for way or walk, and so it's well known. The Camino de Santiago is the Camino that's well known, that is through northern Spain, that finishes in Santiago, the final resting place of St James, and that Camino de Santiago de Compostela has been going for about 1,000 years. So it is a pilgrimage undertaken by pilgrims who travel to Santiago, but there are other pilgrimages around the world. But I think this one caught our fascination, so we've called it the Aussie Camino. We wanted to adopt some practices from that Camino, because it really captured our hearts. And
for what reason, may I ask? What was it that captured your heart about this particular one? And when you say we, who are we? Yeah.
It started from a group of workmates that I share an office with, Stephen Murphy, another chap who I work with, who's now gone to another school, and Michael Dillon, who is still working with me. And so I think what captured us was the idea that in some ways it was sort of very much centred on the individual, and it was, in a way, it sort of encapsulated the pilgrim spirit, which wasn't really within it was sort of outside the Australian experience. It was a sort of a European experience, and our idea of being a pilgrim in Australia has sort of been limited to bus trips around religious places or people or events. It's sort of been, we haven't got that sort of ancient tradition in Australia of walking to sacred places like they do in Europe, or through Central Europe, or through the Middle East, whereby pilgrims sort of undertake this sort of dangerous route, if you like, and plod to get to there, and just by getting to the final destination point, it's sort of seen as a reward. Now, we've had this sort of safe notion, I suppose, if you like, whereby which is sort of closer to tourism than it is to pilgrimage. So we wanted to try and do something a little bit more borrow traditions more back to the ancient tradition where possible, but still put it in the modern Australian context.
Can you perhaps distinguish the difference between a pilgrim and a tourist for us, please?
Well, this is, I suppose, where we come, where a lot of people are coming from, because we don't really have pilgrimages in the Australian context. Tourism is around about booking and paying for accommodations and meals and things in advance, so that you can be sure what you're going to have and see and do every day or every part of the journey. In our context, or the Australian context, we leave very little to chance, whereas the pilgrim really grasps and embraces the uncertainty. So when we went out last year, this small group of friends of ours, we didn't know what we were going to do from one day to the next. We had plotted a point, and we were just going to rely on strangers and our own wits to get us through. So we liked that idea. And so a pilgrim is somebody who embraces the uncertainties, who looks for meaning in the uncertainties, who allows other people to come into their life and shares his or her own life with other people along the way. And I suppose at the end of the day too, it's a pilgrim it's an individual experience rather than a group one. But in the Australian context, I recognise that we still probably have this. If people are to go on the Camino, it's probably going to go in groups. So that's what we've done until now.
So you've only just done the one, apart from the initial one where there were 3 people, I believe. Yes.
Yes, that's right.
We did a practice run first with 3 people.
Well, we had when we did it the first time, there was no certainty that there was going to be a second. Mm-hmm. When I came back, I thought I'll just let a few people know and see what happens. Mm-hmm. So I wrote a few articles, mm-hmm. and then put them in some various publications, and then I said, well, I'll see what sort of response I get from those articles.
I'd imagine there'd be a lot of hard work behind the scenes, and even plotting the route or the journey. We're going to need to go to a break now, but I'd like to know actually how you got to select the site geographically and how you plotted the route.
Okay.
Yes?
Sure.
We're going to a break now. We'll see you back shortly. Welcome back. My guest today is Luke Mills, who has recently pioneered an Aussie Camino route for pilgrims. Welcome back, Luke. Luke, prior to the break, we were talking about the route that you plotted for the journey for the pilgrims. Why did you select the route you selected, and where is it, and what does it have to offer?
Well, we wanted to base it upon as I said, the Camino in Spain, which recognised the resting place of St. James. Now, St. James is the patron saint of Spain. So we wanted to do something which recognised our patron saint, our only saint, which is Mary MacKillop. Mary travelled all over Australia. She was born here in Melbourne and throughout New Zealand as well. But it's widely recognised that her first work as a sister was done in Panola, And so we thought that's where we should complete our Camino. It had a nice sort of symmetry because it was out of the major centres. There is a museum in Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide, but this one was really outside of that. It's recognised as being the place where she first began her work, and also Portland is the place where she was last a lay teacher, living with her family, the McKillop family, working and teaching in the school in Portland, and the school is still there. So we felt that that would make a good place in the sense that from Portland to Penola, which is about 220 k's, there is a sort of a calling, if you like, from that route, from Portland through to Penola, and we can complete it going through there. There were enough towns with to walk from one to another that we could complete in a day's travel. There's one or two gaps which we had to fill up with a bus trip, but we have got it down so that we stay in about 6 towns along the way of the 7 nights. So that was the point. We wanted to sort of provide recognition in a way of our only saint here, St Mary.
So it's a 7-night journey, a 7-day. 6 days?
7 days of walking.
7 days of walking,
yes.
Yes.
Yes, so we do about 30 kilometres a day.
Oh,
yes.
That's a lot of walking.
Well, when we were out there, we were assisted with some vehicle backup, and this helps out a lot. So that we felt that we only needed to take on our backs what we needed for the day. When we went out on this Camino this year, there was, as I said, there was almost 30 of us. Many of the pilgrims had done the Camino in Spain or other pilgrimages through Portugal or through the Middle East, and they were saying that a lot of the time the distance is not so far each day, but they are carrying a full pack. And so we walk a bit further, but our packs are lighter. So, yes, you're still tired at the end of each day, though, certainly.
What type of people responded to the Pilgrim?
Well, when I put the message out, I received a whole lot of emails back from people who wanted to come from all over the country, and I was quite amazed by what sort of response I got. Our youngest was 22, our oldest was 74.
Oh dear!
We had 20 men and 10 women, and because the articles I had written were in Catholic publications, a lot of the people were from a Catholic background of varying degrees of commitment, we could say. I suppose in a sense that going on a pilgrimage or Camino is probably traditionally a Catholic notion. People from a different background might not it might not resonate. So it's fair to say that a lot of the people were sort of at least sympathetic towards Catholicism, but not necessarily practicing. It had a wide group of people that really just wanted to come to what was going to be a lovely walk. And as I stated before, when we went from Portland to Penola, one of the things that we wanted to do was to make it really beautiful. Mm-hmm. We thought there's no point on going from Portland from Portland to Penola if we're going to walk along the major highway, which you can. So we don't take the closest route. We don't take the shortest route. In fact, we don't even take a route that Mary would have walked. Mary McKillop travelled by coach, and she would have gone on the tracks which are now major highways. And it's very unpleasant and it's very dangerous. And in fact, there have been Caminos before that have gone from either Ballarat or Hamilton or Adelaide to Penola down the major highways, and they are very unpleasant. So what we, like in Spain, we drew the same sort of equivalent in that St James didn't travel along that route. It was merely a route that people made their way through to Santiago. It wasn't necessarily a route that St James had travelled. We wanted to have a route whereby we had a starting point at Portland and finishing point at Penola at the Mary McKillop Museum there. But we were going to take a scenic route. And it's very beautiful. We walk through a national park, and we also walk through farmlands along the beach, up and down railway lines. It's very, very pleasant. So along cliff tops as well. So
it sounds lovely. What standard of accommodation did the pilgrimage offer?
We stayed in basically the pubs. Each place we stayed in from Portland, and then we stayed in a school camp. At all the other places we stayed in the local hotel, and they were very happy to see us. And it was great because we got a meal and a bed and a shower every night. So there was no complaints about the accommodation.
Okay. And do you do much camping at all?
None.
None at all.
It's one of the good things about going on the Camino is that there's no camping and cooking involved. You merely go to the hotel, book in, and have a shower and a meal, and then go to bed that night. Of course, we had during our meals we recollected all the day's events and picked up all the loose ends that we had and that we'd started on the day's discussions and things like that. So yeah, there was lots of times to talk.
Sounds too easy. We're going for another break, Luke, so we'll be back shortly. We'll see you back soon. Welcome back. My name is Lucy and my guest today is Luke Mills, and he's talking to us about the Aussie Camino pilgrimage. Hi, Luke. Luke, what things do you do that make it a pilgrimage rather than a mere tour?
Well, as I said, first of all, earlier on, it's a mindset. So I'd love for people to come along with the mindset that they are going to be a pilgrim rather than a tourist. So that's the first thing that I'd like for each person to be able to embrace. There are some other things, of course, which we do. We have some of the same customs as they do in Santiago. So we have a passport that is that the pilgrim takes from one town to the next, and they carry that with them. And we've had stamps made for all the places that they stay. So the hotel owners or the parish church would stamp our passport at each location. We also had a credential that was made. Now, credential is the certificate that the pilgrim receives once they arrive at the cathedral in Santiago. Now, we had one that was made that was more appropriate for us arriving at St. Joseph's in Penola, so we gave them the credential as well. We carried things like the scallop shell, which is the international symbol for the pilgrim, which we put on our backs. And then it was important we wanted to sort of make it feel as though people were part of a spiritual journey as well. And that was by starting off at the beginning of the pilgrimage, which was in East Melbourne at the Mary MacKillop Heritage Centre there. So we started there with a farewell mass from one of the priests, Father Michael from Sacred Heart in Kew, who was very sympathetic to the idea and wanted to see the Aussie Camino develop. And so he celebrated a farewell pilgrim's mass for us. And then we drove down to Portland and we started it from there. Each day started with a reflection, which was done from the guidebooks that we had or some other personal reflection. And it was basically a thought for the day. That's the way that we used it. We often used readings for the day or other thoughts and meditations that we would have. And it usually went for about 5 or 10 minutes before each day. And then after that, we were on the road. And we would then break up into our small groups or whatever groups or walk together individually, and we would make our way through basically almost the whole day onto the next town that night. We would often rest by the side of the road, so that's where we were able to have our meals, and by the time we got into dinner to the hotel each night, we were pretty tired and hungry, and really happy to be there.
I'd imagine by the end of the tour, most of the pilgrims would be quite connected and interactive with one another. Would that be the case?
Oh, yeah, very much so. I mean, we had a terrific group, and because you're out on the road for such a long period of time, you get a chance to really talk to people. In this day and age, we often don't get that time because our interactions are so short. But when you're walking for 8 hours a day with a smallish group, yes, you certainly get a chance to talk to people for long periods of time, or just walk with them without talking. So it's really nice. And then, of course, we have dinner each night with everybody, and we can reflect on the day's events.
What I'd like to ask you now is, what are your hopes for the Aussie Camino for the future?
Well, I'd really like as many Australians to go on it as possible. I'd like to think that it's a walk for all Australians, not just for Catholics. I'd like to think that I'd like to think that we need something here in Australia, and that we should have a Camino in Australia, that recognising our only saints. I think it's really important. I think as a nation we haven't had one, and I think we're poorer for it. So I'd really like to be able to provide, or help to provide, an experience that we have something that is uniquely Australian. And from the feedback that I have received from those people who went out with us who had been to Spain, they said, oh no, this is very much an Australian experience. By the places that we've stayed, it's very different to Spain, so we've tried to borrow some of the customs, but the experience is still very much an Australian experience by going into the outback and staying in small country towns. So I'd like it that all different kinds of people, from school groups or university groups, students of that age from 18s to 25s, parish groups from work, and families could go. I'd like them to be able to, at one point in time, say that they've been on the Camino in Australia. That would be my hope. And they would do it very much in their own time, and at their own pace. Now, at the moment, that's still not possible because the Camino sort of needs a little bit more work, and that's what we're working on at the moment, to try and fill in all the gaps and to really support the pilgrims all the way through from the start to the end. At the moment, you still need a little bit of help, but the more that people walk on the Camino, the better it will become. And so it really needs pilgrims to go through there at the moment. So that's my hope for the future. It's not something I want to own, but it's something I want to support.
Something you want to grow. Just quickly, we're almost at the end of our program, but could you please just talk to us about the shell? What does the shell symbolise, and why the shell?
The shell, the scallop shell, which is the international symbol for the pilgrim, was originally the shell that was in from the northern coastline of Spain, and St James's body was allegedly buried under scallop shells by his disciples, by his followers, when his boat was allegedly washed up on the coast there. So, and he was buried under the scallop shell. So it has that sort of significance. But now it's recognised around the world of being a very much a pilgrim symbol.
Well, Luke, we've come to the end of our program, and I've certainly found it very fascinating listening to you, and I'm sure our viewers would have as well. So good luck with the future of the pilgrims, and I hope you get lots of response.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Luke. You've been watching the Spirit of Life program. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place. Take care.
Bring it to birth and blow where you will. Blow, blow, blow till I be but breath of the Spirit blowing in me.
Spirit of Life was proudly sponsored by Mattress Oz, mattressesaras.com.au.